So what is going on, guys? I am Black Ops Amazing. Welcome back to another video on the channel where today we are going to be taking a look at everything we know so far about Call of Duty Vanguard Zombies, what the storyline could possibly be from the dates that we know it's going to be taking place in, also the fact that it's a continuation of the Dark Ether story, however it is a prequel to Black Ops Cold War, and we have our very first Vanguard Zombies Easter egg as well. So as always, if you do go in to enjoy today's video, don't forget to drop a like rating by the end, it really does help me out. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest videos on the channel, but let's get into this. Here we go, and enjoy. So, just the other day, Vanguard Zombies was officially confirmed. We know that the game as a whole is being developed by Sledgehammer. It is taking place during World War II. It will include a campaign, multiplayer, Warzone integration, but the Zombies mode on it will be developed by Treyarch. The official description that we got from them said, "We're excited to announce a franchise-first crossover as Call of Duty Vanguard features an all-new Zombies game mode with development led by Treyarch Studios. This cooperative experience continues and intertwines with the Dark Ether story to create a deeply engaging lore, all while innovating on the core gameplay that the mode is famous for. Discover the unspeakable horrors of this precursor to Black Ops Cold War Zombies while holding off the relentless onslaught of the undead when Vanguard launches on November 5th. So the Dark Ether story continues, however we are going back to the 1940s, before what we've seen so far in Black Ops Cold War, which we know is in the 80s. And if you just take a look at the logo itself, you can see in the words zombies, there are runes absolutely everywhere. And as of late in Season 5 for Cold War, we have just had this piece of intel in the game, which is a piece of Craft's journal page, and it says, "This rune keeps appearing from our digs. It must have a meaning. Craft 1944. And the rune looks very similar to the one that we can see in the M, right in the middle here. Although it doesn't look exactly the same to me, this rune looks similar to the new piece of intel we can find in Black Ops Cold War. So if we know that it's a part of the Dark Ether story, it is a prequel to Cold War taking place in the 1940s, presumably judging from this piece of intel in 1944, maybe a little bit before 1943, or maybe even after 45, 46. If it's going to be happening towards the end of World War II, well, this is interesting because we know that the Dark Ether story, most of the interesting stuff that happens, takes place in the 80s. Yes, the Dark Ether story did begin during World War II with Project Endstation, Dr. Vogel, Dr. Kurtz, Hitler was involved. However, from what we know about the story, there was only ever one minor zombie outbreak during the 40s. That happened in D Machine, it was contained, it didn't spread anywhere, and from what we know about it, there wasn't really too much else to it. If you just take a look at this piece of intel from the CIA, which records the timeline of all of the dimensional breaches that have happened, it says, "Per request from the Director of Central Intelligence, Office of Requiem has composed a listing of known dimensional breaches, aka outbreak zones, since the initial incident in the Marasco Nature Preserve, March 7th, 1944. German scientists at the Project Endstation facility near Poznan, Poland, used their experimental particle accelerator to punch a hole in the dimensional membrane, unleashing exotic energies and creatures from the dimension we now call the Dark Ether. Breaches contained but remained open until elements of the Red Army sealed it on February the 10th, 1945. Records of the incident were suppressed until 1983. And then, from then on, every other outbreak zone took place in the 80s. The only zombie outbreak as a part of the Dark Ether timeline took place in 1944, which was in D Machine. Which means, in my opinion, since Vanguard Zombies is a prequel to Black Ops Cold War, there are three possibilities. One, because there was only ever one zombie outbreak that we knew of that took place in the 40s. It will tell the story of that. It will expand on what took place in D Machine, but we know everything that happened. The zombie outbreak there wasn't too big, so that's one possibility. The second one is there were other zombie outbreaks that happened. They just weren't recorded. We don't know of them, so maybe there were other breaches, we just don't know about them because the Nazis kept them a secret. Or the third possibility is we go inside of the Dark Ether. That's where the zombies come from. At the end of D Machine, we know the Nazis hid in there and ended up turning into zombies themselves, so Vanguard Zombies could take place in the Dark Ether. Those are the only three options I can see us having. It expands on what happened in D Machine, there were other zombie outbreaks that we don't know of during the 40s, or it takes place within the Dark Ether. Groups like Omega and Requiem won't exist because Omega was set up during the 70s, Requiem set up during the 80s. Also, Samantha and Eddie won't be a part of our story because, again, they didn't arrive in the Cold War universe until the 60s. The story is going to be told before their arrival. It will likely include characters such as Dr. Vogel, maybe Valentina, Dr. Kurtz, Hitler, Steiner, new characters that we haven't heard of. If it does tell us more about what happened in D Machine, well, if you take a listen to a couple of radios we can find in Cold War, you get a good idea of how the first, in brackets, zombie outbreak began.
I have completed my adjustments, Dr. Vogel. You may begin recording.
Thank you, I already have. This is Ulrich Vogel, Director of Project N Station. 7th of March, 1944, 10:03 p.m. Commencing cyclotron test run number 12. Dr. Kurtz, please proceed.
All readings are within acceptable parameters. Looks like we are getting the collisions we expected and, some interesting patterns are starting to...
What was that?
I do not know. Gauges are redlining. We have to shut down.
Thank God. What is happening to the air around the collider?
You men! Back away from that!
Cut the power!
I'm trying! Controls are not responding!
Guard! Retreat! Seal those things in the chamber! Ulrich Vogel, Director of Project N Station, 12th of March, 1944. 5 days have passed since the accident. I am starting to see it not as a setback, but a breakthrough. Literally. The cyclotron continues to operate, apparently without an external power source. We cannot deactivate it, and it is still manifesting the strange phenomenon I call a rift, and Kurtz calls a wormhole. He attached instruments to the end of a long metal pole and passed it through the rift. The readings confirm that somehow the cyclotron ripped through the fabric of space-time. Something lies on the other side. A parallel world, or perhaps a whole universe. But we dare not approach too closely, lest we suffer the same fate as the men currently held in our medical clinic. Those men remain in a state best described as living death. Kurtz thinks they caught a high dose of some exotic radiation from the other side of the rift. We are checking their blood and tissue samples for traces of rare elements or otherworldly pathogens. I pray, whatever it is not contagious.
Dr. Vogel and Dr. Kurtz were doing experiments on the cyclotron, which is a particle accelerator. We learned that Kurtz decided to do some modifications to it. However, he went too far, and one night when they activated the cyclotron, it began making a high-pitched noise. The air above it ripped open, the radiation alarms went off. Kurtz and Vogel tried to shut down the machine, but they couldn't, and what they had accidentally done was torn a hole through space-time. They could see a glimpse of another dimension. We know that other dimension is the dark ether. Inside of the dark ether is Ethereum, or as the Germans called it, Exoelement 1. That is what creates the undead, and that was the cause of the first undead outbreak at D Machine. Thankfully, it was only a small one, and they did manage to contain it, but now that they had learned of another dimension, after doing experiments on it and learning that time there works differently, they informed High Command of this newly discovered dimension, and with this knowledge, the Führer's plan, knowing that he was going to lose World War II, was to send the remaining Nazis into the dark ether, where they would wait, gather in armies, and then one day escape and continue the Reich. This was called Operation Boulder. In a document we can find addressed to Dr. Vogel, it says, "It is my responsibility to inform you that the Reichstag has officially approved your proposal. You may begin preparations to send a military task force through the dimensional breach at N Station. Should the war continue on its present course, the survival of the Reich must be ensured." This undertaking was christened Operation Boulder by the High Command. The reference to the Norse god who rose after death is not lost on me. For obvious reasons, the entire operation is strictly classified. I only received clearance because Project N Station remains officially under the command of Ian Viren. There are certain technical matters only we can oversee. I am to facilitate the effort in any way I can, but the actual logistics and manpower fall to the newly created Task Force Boulder, under the command of Gruppenführer Muller. Make ready, Vogel. Requisition whatever you need as soon as you can. I estimate Task Force Boulder will be fully assembled and on your doorstep roughly 1 month from now. Ensure you have a stable, persistent gateway established by then, because the Red Army is marching your way and we are running out of time. This may be the last you'll hear from me. If so, I wish you the best of luck. We have come a long way from your original request to build a new type of cyclotron. We were established to harness the power of the atom for the Reich, but you may have tapped a power that outstrips atomic energy. So in my opinion, there are still some aspects of that story that Treyarch could tell, but it is a zombies game, and as far as the zombies go during that time, there wasn't any major outbreak, which makes me think there must have been other outbreaks with the zombies that we don't know of, that were kept classified, because everything that we are aware of, either Omega or Requiem, they know of it. So there could have been other outbreaks with the Nazis during the 40s that Requiem and Omega don't know of, therefore we wouldn't know of it either. Every piece of intel we find in game is from either Maxis, the Dark Ether, Requiem or Omega. We don't have all of the intel from the Nazis and what they were doing. So there must have been more outbreaks, or the Vanguard Zombie story is going to be taking place within the Dark Ether. We do know that Dr. Strauss was also a part of that. He originally worked with the Nazis, so he could play a big role in Vanguard Zombies. We'll just have to wait and see. And talking of Dr. Strauss, well, there is a really interesting document we can find. It is from Strauss to the director of Requiem. He is talking about missing Axis scientists, and well, in here he mentions a few interesting experiments that the Nazis were doing during World War II. And could this give us an idea of some of the things we might be seeing within Vanguard? Strauss writes, "As you know, I am not a sentimental man, but lately I find myself thinking about the waning days of World War II and how I made it my business to surrender to the American forces. The alternative, capture by the Red Army, was too terrible to contemplate. Happily, I ended up among Axis scholars and scientists brought here by Operation Paperclip. Not everyone shared my good fortune. I cannot help but wonder about all of my former colleagues presumed captured or killed by the Soviets. With no definitive records of their fate, the possibility remains that even now they toil in Soviet laboratories, representing a real and present danger that must be quantified. If our side got moon landings, ICBMs and Ethereum weapons from Paperclip scientists, what might the USSR be extracting from their Axis scholars? Specifically, what became of those who oversaw Germany's Wunderwaffen programs? I personally knew scientists developing the Sonnengaue orbital solar weapon, the Hannenbu flying saucer aircraft, and the anti-gravity generator known as Die Glocke all went missing in 1945, as did their immediate families. I picture them working for the Omega Group now, their loved ones held hostage. I also wonder about German expeditions to find even more exotic weapons and sources of power. The SS Annenberg unit sourced the glow for the likes of Thor's hammer, the Holy Grail, and Atlantis itself. Fantastical? Yes, but what if the scholars they forced to help them actually found something usable? Most of all, I wonder about Dr. Ulrich Vogel, my supervisor at Project Endstation. In a sense, he started our war against the Dark Ether. What became of him? Not to mention his wife and daughter. I therefore formally request the allocation of Requiem and CIA resources to officially investigate and verify the fate of these former Axis scientists and research experts. If they're still alive and represent a threat, we must know and prepare for it. I look forward to a reply, Oscar Strauss, Lead Energy Research, and then at the bottom of this document it says denied, so the director of Requiem has denied his request, and Strauss replies, Scheiße, I knew I shouldn't have mentioned Atlantis. But Strauss tells us, since he worked very closely to them, that during World War II, the Nazis were working on Wunderwaffen programs, so they were developing things such as the Sonnengaue orbital solar weapon, basically using the sun's energy to kill people. They're also working on a flying saucer aircraft and an anti-gravity generator known as Die Glocke, which we know a lot about. All of these experiments went missing during World War II, and Strauss is saying, well, what happened to all of this? This was stuff that they were working on. We don't see any evidence of things like this in Cold War. Maybe we could see this stuff in Vanguard. And he also mentions the Germans going on expeditions to find exotic weapons and sources of power. They scoured the globe for the likes of Thor's hammer, the Holy Grail, and Atlantis. What if they found this? And I find it quite interesting how the director of Requiem, who we believe is Richthofen, he denied Strauss's request, and Strauss thinks it's because he mentioned Atlantis. Now this could just be because the director doesn't believe in Atlantis. As soon as he read that, he thought, what a stupid thing to say, there's no such thing. Or maybe the director does know of Atlantis' existence. He doesn't want Strauss to look into this any further, and that's the reason why he denied this. But the Germans were scouring the globe, searching for Thor's hammer, the Holy Grail, Atlantis, and even more. What if they found some of this stuff? What if the Nazis did discover Atlantis? What if they found Thor's hammer? Could we see some of this stuff in Vanguard Zombies? That to me would be super interesting, because Atlantis especially is something we've been wanting to see in zombies for such a long time. And then the final thing I do want to say is, well, right now in our storyline, we have been hearing more about the Forsaken, the One, the Devourer of Souls. However, he is a more recent presence. Zykov, who is the Russian tank soldier who has been trapped within the Dark Ether since the 40s. As you would expect, he now knows a lot of what's going on in the Dark Ether since he's been there for such a long time, and he told us this.
Things were not always like this, my friend. I remember a time here in the Dark Ether when the Forsaken did not even exist. When I first crossed over, things were very different. And back then, there were many powerful entities at war here, forming alliances, betraying each other. Not that I realized it at first, any more than an insect would know the names of leaders in the Great Patriotic War. But eventually I came to recognize the lords of the Dark Ether. They had been locked in an ever-changing stalemate since the dawn of time. And then, one by one, the Forsaken hunted them down, consumed them, and made their power his own. The Forsaken imposed order upon the Dark Ether. Those who remained rallied to him, seeking his favor and pledging loyalty. This is a different place than when I arrived. It is infinitely more dangerous.
So there was one point in the Dark Ether when Zykov first arrived here in the 40s, when the Forsaken didn't even exist. There was only the Old Ones, the Elder Gods, who were at a stalemate in the Dark Ether since that realm was young, and that goes back eons. It seems like the Forsaken only became a presence around 4,000 days after Zykov arrived in the Dark Ether. Now, we know that time in the Dark Ether works differently. We don't know the exact conversion, so I can't tell you that. But during the 40s, when Vanguard is going to be taking place, the Forsaken wasn't even a thing. He didn't come into power until later on, so it looks like he won't be a part of our story in Vanguard Zombies. So yeah, there we go. That is everything I can think of, all of the alleyways that I have covered. 3 main possibilities for me on where I think they could take the storyline, although 2 really only make sense. Either we are going to the Dark Ether, or there were more zombie outbreaks during the 40s that we aren't aware of, and knowing that the Germans were searching for things such as Thor's hammer, Atlantis, and creating weapons such as Die Glock, flying saucers, a sun gun. Could we be seeing any of that? So there we go. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. As always, hopefully you have enjoyed. If you have, drop a like rating. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with all the latest videos on the channel. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.